Today, I'm happy to be joined by Mackenzie Ledoux, one of the crop extension specialists for the government of Saskatchewan. She is here today to give us a bit of a wrap-up on the crop season for Saskatchewan. And so thank you so much for being with me today, Mackenzie.
Thank you so much for having me today, Thomas.
And so we're now almost into December, and so all of the crop producers have, of course, finished up harvesting. So what have the overall yields looked like for the province of Saskatchewan?
Yields definitely varied for a lot of our producers based on where they were within the province. So overall, our average yields for the province were estimated for all of our crops. So hard red spring wheat was estimated to yield 43 bushels per acre, durum at 24 bushels per acre, and oats at 82 bushels per acre. When we look at some other crops such as canola, we're seeing that yields were estimated to be 33 bushels per acre, and flax is estimated to be 18. When we look at some of our pulses, we see that lentils were estimated to be 1,101 pounds per acre and chickpeas at 858 pounds per acre. What we're seeing is that, again, our yields are dependent on where you are in the province. For example, on the west side of the province, there was a little bit less moisture, and the west side was estimating a little bit lower yields due to that lack of moisture, and whereas the east side had a little bit more moisture, although not enough in some areas, most definitely. However, that moisture that they got did help with those yields a little bit, and those yields are a little bit higher on the east side of the province. And when we look at quality for our crops, we're seeing that overall, the quality of Saskatchewan crops is really being estimated to be above our 10-year average, where a lot of our crops are being estimated to be within the top 2 categories for all of the grading of the crop.
So now we'll move to the Northwest, which is, of course, the region that Lloydminster was in. And, of course, here a lot of producers were talking about how they were quite dry. But was that consistent throughout the rest of the region? And just overall, how were our yields compared to the rest of Saskatchewan?
So in the Northwest, what we're seeing is that although it is on the west side of the province, the north side of the west side did get a little bit more moisture, and our yields in the Northwest are a little bit higher than the provincial averages. But of course, that is dependent on where you are in the Northwest. Of course, as you said, around Lloydminster, it was a little bit drier for sure. However, our Northwest does encompass essentially a very large portion of the province, and again, that portion of the province was very variable given the rains. So when we look at the Northwest specifically, what we're seeing is that our yields are a little bit higher than the rest of the province. For example, for oats, it's 93 bushels per acre, whereas our provincial average is 82. For barley, it's 67 bushels per acre, whereas the province is 56. If we look at hard red spring, we're seeing 49 bushels per acre being estimated, whereas the provincial average is 43. When we look at canola, we're seeing that it's 43 bushels per acre, and the provincial average is 33 bushels per acre. So again, that Northwest region, there was limited moisture. However, the moisture that was received early in the season really pulled through for a lot of the producers up there.
And so one of the concerns we talked about throughout the whole year were how good the hay crops and feeding crops were going to be for livestock producers. Were the crops good enough that livestock producers should be good for a long winter?
Producers were concerned about their winter feed supplies earlier in the growing season when they were forecasting what this fall was going to look like. Many found that they were able to secure feed from other parts of the province or neighboring provinces overall, and they now find that a lot of them have adequate feed supplies for this coming winter. When we look at our hay yields specifically, we see that provincially alfalfa yields are 1.22 tons per acre, brome alfalfa is 1.19 tons per acre, and green feed is 1.69 tons per acre. On irrigated land, of course, the yields are a little bit higher, with alfalfa yielding 2.8 tons per acre and brome alfalfa yielding 2.12 tons per acre. Silage yields provincially are at 7 tons per acre. A lot of our producers are feeling that the hay and feed that they were able to maintain and secure this summer are of good quality.
So it's been a very warm start to the winter, Mackenzie, but I know from some of the talks I've had with some producers, they were hoping for a little bit of freeze and a little bit of snow to help replenish those moisture reserves. Is that a concern for the entirety of the province with how little the moisture reserves are after a tough season this year?
As you said, we did have a little bit of a warm start to this winter, and what that allowed producers to do was to really wrap up the field work that they were doing, of course, applying their chemical and fall applied fertilizer at appropriate timing for sure. However, it did allow them an extended season to do their fall field work. So that allowed them to take a little bit less off their plate. As when we look at soil moisture, however, we see that soil moisture as we go into this winter was definitely limited. Of course, that's going into the winter, so anything can happen in the winter. Of course, there were some wet snowfalls that came through a couple of weeks ago throughout the province, and that really helped producers with building up some soil moisture. However, we're far from that adequate level of soil moisture provincially. What we are hoping for is that producers do have a lot of rain and wet snows come through this winter, and hopefully that they're able to maintain those and the crops double and be able to catch some snow and help those fields fill up those soil reserves.
Thank you so much for all the information, Mackenzie, and we will definitely talk to you again in the new year about the crop season once it starts up next spring.
Thank you so much, Thomas. Thanks for having me and having me this summer, and I look forward to working with you again.